Thanks so much. Yeah, I immediately want to ask other questions about markets, but I guess I'll give my talk instead. So I don't have a PowerPoint or a handout or anything. The one link I did want to share is my talk is focused on kind of a case study, and a lot of my information I've gotten from the Organization to Counter Digital Hate. And so I just posted the link in the chat to their report. So if you would like to look more specifically at some examples or what they say, that's available to you. So yeah, hi, thanks for being here today. My talk is titled Social Epistemology and a Case Study in Unethical Advertising. Essentially, what I want to talk to you about today is this sort of weird example of advertising that I think ends up revealing a lot about how we should approach understanding the ethics of advertising. Specifically, I'm going to argue for a bit of a paradigm shift. Advertisements are usually ethically criticized based on the potential harm of the products that they promote. So for example, if you advertise like cigarettes or alcohol to kids, like that can be harmful. And so that would be like one reason to be critical of, you know, why host advertisements. But I think there's a variety of other ways that advertisements can be damaging within society, in particular epistemically damaging. And so by that, I mean our practices of forming beliefs and seeking knowledge, which I think we should understand as fundamentally social. And so there's ways that unethical advertisements can undermine our public discourse. And I think that corporations have social and moral obligations to be more selective when they're considering the advertisements that they're creating and the advertisements that they're hosting and displaying. So the case study I want to consider for my talk today is the example of Google and Facebook hosting ads for so-called abortion reversal pills during the 2020 to 2021. And I think this really nicely indicates some of the social epistemic harms that can result from advertising. I should flag at the start of my talk, I don't think I'm making any points about the ethics of abortion. I think whatever your stance on abortion, you should still be concerned about these ads. So I'm not trying to analyze that issue. So kind of the basic facts is, you know, corporations paid for ads, marketing kind of, again, abortion reversal pills, which are not supported by medical institutions and don't work. And Facebook has showed these ads, it was estimated about probably 18 million times overall in 2020 to 2021. Again, this is from that report I linked in the chat, which is from the Center for Countering Digital Hate. And Google shows these ads on more than 4/5 of searches related to abortion across a number of different US cities. So a recent study, I guess actually not too recent, in the New England Journal of Medicine, there was only one clinical trial on these so-called abortion reversal pills. Essentially what they are is very high doses of hormones. There was one clinical study that tried to look at this. The study had to be discontinued because it leads to dangerous hemorrhaging and blood loss. So there's no evidence that this treatment actually would work to reverse a medical abortion. And in fact, it's very dangerous. So there's a lack of medical evidence demonstrating the safety and efficacy of this treatment, which is in part why the Center for Countering Digital Hate calls these ads, you know, unproven, unethical, and dangerous. So that's the case I want to look at. And so, you know, what this reveals, I think, about the way we ethically analyze what's going on when a corporation decides to host an ad. So I'm just dividing up this case study into two parts. First, I'm going to consider kind of an old or classic analysis of how we would look at the ethics of advertising for this ad. And then I'm going to argue that that's not sufficient and give kind of a novel analysis of what's going on with these advertisements. So classically, you know, there's at least two reasons to object to this ad. One is that these ads are hypocritical in the sense that they explicitly violate the guidelines that both Google and Facebook set out for themselves. So the fact that they allow these ads to be hosted goes against their stated values. So Google has rules that ban advertisers from promoting, quote, misleading information about products or non-government approved products that are marketed in a way that implies they're safe or effective, end quote. Okay, so abortion reversal pills fall very cleanly into this category, right? It's misleading to suggest that these are medically supported pills that are safe or effective at intervening in a medical abortion. And they are not governmentally approved. And so marketing them in this way, again, just explicitly violates Google's guidelines. Similarly, Facebook has guidelines that would also ban ads of this nature. And Facebook says that they would ban ads like this from being targeted to 13 to 17-year-olds. So you might think we have obligations, especially to be careful with the advertisements that we show to minors. But again, research suggests that at least 3,000 children under 18 saw these ads at some point based on their records of advertisements. So that's one reason, is like, look, Google and Facebook, why are you showing these ads? You explicitly said you wouldn't show ads like this. Another reason, again, on a kind of a classic analysis, is that it's bad to advertise things that are explicitly harmful. So these so-called abortion reversal procedures are, quote, unproven and unethical according to the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, okay? So they explicitly say, quote, claims regarding abortion reversal treatments are not based on science and do not meet clinical standards, end quote, okay? So that's another reason you might object to these ads. If there's a chance that someone actually sees this ad and actually takes a pill that gives them a really high dose of hormones, you are putting that person who saw the ad in a position of physical risk. Okay, so there's a chance of physical harm. So in this classic analysis, ads are problematic for corporations to host if they're disingenuous in some way, or fraudulent, or the product of the ad is harmful. Now, I think all of these are true, and these are valid criticisms of Google and Facebook for hosting these ads, but I don't think it fully captures the harm that's going on, and I'm not sure it even fully captures the most relevant harm. Okay, so while these ads were hosted, there's very little evidence that too many people took them seriously or actually took hormone pills as a result of viewing these ads. So what I want to argue is, even if no one bought and took pills as a result of seeing these ads are still socially damaging. And so that's the analysis I want to give, is looking at the way these ads impact our knowledge practices. Okay. So the Center for Countering Digital Hate, when they're analyzing this, they said, it's problematic because these ads are spreading misinformation to vulnerable women and girls. Okay. And Facebook and Google are, quote, making money from this propaganda, end quote. So these seem to be highlighting that it's not so much the hypocrisy or the physical risk, but rather this misinformation that we should largely be concerned with. And so I want to dig into that as an analysis, because if the problem is, this misinformation, it's a problem that's occurring for everyone that views the ad, regardless of whether or not they fully believe the ad, or regardless of whether they actually take action based on the ad or take a hormone pill based on the ad. So I've got 3 different ways that I think these types of ads can be epistemically harmful, again, even if you don't buy the product or take the pill. So first, these ads are harmful with a sort of brute force epistemic manipulation, is kind of what I'm calling it, which is psychology studies have shown that if you repeat a false claim over and over and over, people start to find that claim more plausible. Okay, that's really unfortunate, but it's just a psychological truth about ourselves. The other thing that psychologists have shown is that people tend to forget where they've learned things. Okay, people forget the origins of where they have heard a fact or heard a statistic or something before. So even if people don't just outright believe these ads, if they're repeated over and over and over, people are going to forget that they got this information from an ad, and people are going to find this claim, namely that there are abortion reversal pills, more plausible over time. Okay, so this sort of brute force epistemic manipulation is going to impact the social environment to the extent that it's going to make some things seem more plausible. Okay, so even if you don't fully buy into the ad, it is making the overall social environment more friendly to disinformation and more friendly to epistemic manipulation in the future, because there's this increased plausibility. So that's one concern, is just this brute force manipulation. A second concern is what I'm calling kind of clouding the conversation, which is not just inducing false beliefs in people, but making people more doubtful of otherwise true beliefs that they might have. So making people feel less justified and confident in their true beliefs. In this case, people feeling less justified and confident in understanding the way that medical abortions work. Okay, so whatever your ethical commitments on abortion, they have early stage medical abortions have been proven to be safe and effective. Okay. And so if individuals no longer feel justified or confident in their beliefs about, say, biologically how a medical abortion works, or what the risks of a medical abortion are, or whether medical abortions can be reversed or not, this can undermine their confidence and their justification that might be important for making healthcare decisions. Okay, so it's going to make it harder for individuals seeing these ads to potentially feel confident that they understand what's going on in an abortion, which might impact how they make that choice. And it does seem to me that this is a central concern in this case, like in this specific case study, that this is what's going on, is kind of a trying to muddy the waters about how to make these medical decisions. It seems like this is a main goal of the organizations that have hosted these advertisements. So the organizations that host these ads also host other ads with directives to call one's legislators, and other ads that post misleading information about the safety of medical abortions. So it seems like this is kind of a way of making people be like, well, if I'm not sure how pregnancy works, or I'm not sure how medical abortions work, I might then be more likely to take action, call my legislature, or to make a different decision, right? Or to be uncertain about my decision-making regarding the safety of medical abortions. I also take it as a good piece of evidence that this is a main concern for people responding to this ad. So in California, especially, there was pushback after it was revealed that like Google and Facebook were allowing these ads for abortion reversal pills to be shown. And one California nurse wanted to put up a counter ad, okay? And so, you know, when we're doing an ethical analysis, okay, what did this organization think was most important in kind of countering this ad? And so what they put up was, quote, patients need medically accurate information, not politically motivated deception about abortion, end quote. So I take it that many people are concerned about this epistemic manipulation and kind of clouding the conversation, of making it harder to tell which facts are certain and which facts are uncertain. Okay, so that's two ways I think the ad is epistemically damaging to society. The third is the ad suggests false portrayals of like the audience of the ad. So if you were totally uninformed and you see this ad for abortion reversal pills, this suggests two things. One, that there's a lot of people out there looking for abortion reversal pills, and two, that they're going to get information on the abortion reversal pills from these hotlines and from this kind of organization about abortion reversal. So this is misleading in two ways. First, statistically speaking, most women who get abortions do not regret their decision and are not Googling ways to reverse it. Second, most women would seek out medical information from their doctor, not from the organization that's paying for these advertisements, right? And so this is another way of manipulating kind of the social environment by kind of taking the role of a medical organization by acting as if other people would seek out this hotline for medical help. So briefly, I think that this kind of newer analysis of the ethics of the advertisement, while it's clearest in this case study, I think these worries generalize. So even if it's the case that no one buys the hormone pills from looking at these ads, I think they are doing societal harm because they're manipulating the social environment by, one, kind of brute force, two, clouding the conversation and making people feel less confident and justified in their other pre-existing beliefs, and three, kind of falsely portraying who the audience of these ads might be. And this is epistemically manipulative and is a way of kind of making it harder for people in society to have critical medical conversations and to feel confident in their beliefs. So two interesting consequences of this analysis. One is that if the primary goal is this epistemic harm, you can see why some of these ads were targeted at men. And in fact, if you look at Facebook, you will see that some of these ads were explicitly targeted at men. If the primary goal is to get people to buy the hormone pills, it's harder to see why you would do this. But if the goal is social manipulation, then you would want this ad to be shown to everyone. Second, this is going to be much trickier for corporations to try to counteract and address. So on kind of a classic model of like, don't fraudulently advertise, you know, what corporations need to do is just tell the truth and then maybe like pay people if they sell something harmful. But once we take epistemic harms into consideration, it's much harder to see how the corporation could reverse some of the harm that it's generating, because mostly what we would need is sort of public education. So as I said, I think this analysis and this problem generalizes beyond just this sort of specific ad to other sorts of ads, where we might think, even if an individual doesn't buy the product in the ad, they still might be subject to this epistemic manipulation. And when it happens at a wider scale, it can make it harder for a community as a whole to have important conversations. So I'm going to wrap it up there and say, in conclusion, while these ads I think are unethical for many reasons, including that they're promoting, life-threatening, medically dangerous actions, we should pay attention specifically to the epistemic harms in this case. That Google and Facebook, either intentionally or unintentionally, they lend their credibility to these sorts of untrue claims when they're the ones hosting these ads. Okay, and so these corporations are then functionally and effectively helping to spread disinformation that does seem like it was designed to manipulate people who are uninformed for political purposes. These corporations are both causally and epistemically directly related to the harm and wrongdoing that happens. And the companies financially benefited from this. And I'm concerned that they have strong financial incentives to take similar actions in the future. So I think this means that we need a broader account of possible harmful impacts from ads, moving beyond just kind of simple fraud or simple harm. Instead, we need to also think about a notion of epistemic responsibility and have a higher standard for the professional behavior we expect from corporations. A key element of corporate responsibility is not only going to be the messages that you put out, but also the ads that you host. And I think this is particularly significant for social media companies like Facebook, because they have a wide audience and their business model is centrally built upon advertising. So it turns out that corporations, I think we should hold them responsible for the impacts that they have on our society. And this means they might be more blameworthy for their advertisements than we had previously thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate, for the great talk. You gave us a lot to unpack and think about with public perception, public forums, use of public space on social media sites, things like that, and really the targeting and intentional manipulation that goes on with many ads that people see. I see we have a hand up by Matt already, as well as the chat. If anyone has questions, go ahead and post them there. Matt, go ahead.
Great, thank you for a fascinating presentation. Seems right to me. I guess my question was just more about how sufficient some of these things are to make something wrong, because I wonder if my intuitions here are being clouded by the real medical harms that are sort of lurking in the backgrounds. I know you take great care to separate those, right? But for instance, if we take 1 and 2, 1 being, I think, making us collectively more friendly to disinformation, and 2 being sort of more doubtful of true beliefs, I could see that, a philosophy class achieves both of those things, where it might advocate open minds and receptions to sort of heterodox ways of thinking, and cultivate self-doubt, saying, oh, what do you not know? Do we know? Whether you read like critical epistemology or something like that. So I feel that a lot of our sort of benign practices achieve or have those 2 effects. And so I wonder if how we can separate that out. Is that wrong then, maybe, to like sort of introduce those sort of self-doubt through philosophy or something like that?
Great, thanks. That's really helpful. I think there's 2 important responses. 1, I think there is a significant difference between the ad and the philosophy class, which is the intent to make someone more vulnerable to future manipulation. So I take it that here with the ads, the goal is not sort of a universal skepticism or like think carefully about what you believe, but a real motivated sort of skepticism with the intent then to give another narrative at some point in the future that is designed to be manipulative in the sense that it's supposed to produce a certain behavioral outcome or a certain political outcome, and is not designed, say, like a philosophy discussion of skepticism might be, to help you assess your evidence or to help you better think about how you form your beliefs. So I think that's one key difference. And the second thing I would say is I do think I'm morally responsible for what I do in my philosophy classroom. I think that's right. I think I'm careful that I don't just go on political rants, but that I try to set my students up to think through issues for themselves. I spend a lot of time thinking about how I ought to do that in the best possible way. And so I think that just supports my point that we ought to hold corporations responsible for the things that they're showing their viewers. So I think Google should think about the fact that it's showing people these ads. So I think I can take that part on board. Does that help?
I guess just follow up, I guess. Yeah, I guess I just, maybe it's, obviously I haven't read the paper, but it's just sort of, what is there's the intent of the actor, and it seems like that matters maybe, or you were sort of connecting the intent to the actual effect where it has a non-even effect where it's a particular kind of disinformation. But I guess if you ground that in the justification of disinformation being bad, or think something we should make ourselves invulnerable to, I just was trying to maybe point out that we often intentionally we cultivate virtues that make us more open-minded, that make us more open to disinformation generally. So maybe it's not the case that being more, so per se, making yourself more vulnerable to disinformation is itself a bad or wrong thing. There has to be sort of a different underlying value, a justifying value, maybe.
Great. And I would think like being open-minded and being careful about how you form your beliefs, I would think would make you more resistant to disinformation. So there's one area where I was missing that in your question.
Gotcha.
Great. Yeah. So you're right. I don't think it's just, every advertisement that makes you hesitate or makes you less certain in your beliefs is going to necessarily be bad. Yeah. So I think there's two ways I would go with that. One is, like I said, that it seems like targeted manipulation. It's supposed to get you to take a certain behavioral action. And the second, I think I would just say that it's not reasons-based in the right sort of way, right? So there are cases in which I might try to intentionally undermine the beliefs of my students, right, to get them to be more open-minded about the world. But hopefully the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to give them evidence and give them reasons that I think ought to influence their belief forming practice. And so I think I'm still treating them rationally in that way by providing reasons. Whereas I think the ads, especially if you're doing this brute force strategy of just repeating something false over and over again, I take it as not being rational and not treating its viewers as rational because it's not appealing to reasons. So I think that's the other answer I could give in addition to the manipulation.
I would like to hear from the audience, just so I'm not talking and taking up time here. If there's anyone in Salon A or anyone via Zoom that wants to unmute and has a question or comment they want to make. Okay, well, I suppose I can do it then. With the use of public spaces such as Google and Facebook, these things tend to be unavoidable in the sense that we say, I'm going to just Google something, to the point where we're so reliant on these things and these become unavoidable. The nature of an ad is not necessarily to provide the best critical insight or information, but to influence a consumer in some way to promote or upsell a product. So many of these ads that we see on social media can be blocked and deemed as insensitive and simply blocked. How do we get such ads to take a further step to not just have something that we have to click on and get rid of, but simply address the fact that they're doing something other than what ads do. They are intending to manipulate or influence or target an audience. How can we hold companies accountable in that way?
Yeah, great. I mean, in part, this is a political question. I'm not sure, right? I'm pretty worried about this. It seems like Facebook and Google showed these ads for well over a year, made hundreds of thousands of dollars, and only stopped because the Center for Countering Digital Hate made this report that got picked up by news. And again, you can see this is a clear violation of the norms that they have laid out in their policies. So I think they're probably doing this with other horrible ads, and they'll probably financially motivated to keep doing it. I think we could try to do audits on companies like this. We could try, to complain when companies do this, but I think it's a real problem, especially for companies like Facebook and Google, where they're making most of their money from ads. I think this is a real worry. And so I think it's something we have to talk about, maybe politically, maybe as a society. To what extent are we willing to put up with this sort of harm? I think one thing we could do is, especially with like the pandemic, maybe we could say we're extra concerned about like medical misinformation or medical harm. So we could try to change our laws to target that. As I said, I think the problem generalizes, but you might be most worried about things that make it harder to make medical decisions. There have been a lot of different suggestions around combating like COVID misinformation online, but I'm kind of pessimistic about them. Most of those proposed interventions haven't really worked. So I think it's either up to us as users of these corporations to say, hey, why are you causing this harm to our society? Can't you find a different way to advertise? Or I think to go the route of legally requiring some more responsibility, or like proving that you're sticking to, kind of what you set out in your, I'm not going to advertise these dangerous things to kids, and then you did. Maybe we need like legal punishments for that. I don't know.